Welcome back to another, I think our fourth installment of our Grays informational videos on our Grays services. Today you have myself, Shannon McKenney, our Director of Proactive Programming, and our wonderful Director of Supportive Services, Hannah Fulmer. And we are going to talk about, we're going to start transitioning into some of our proactive services with today's conversation. And this is really what we've identified as our awareness and support package. This is often where we start organizations. And we're going to dive in a little deeper as to why and what prompted this particular pairing of services and why this is really our bridge between that initial support and some of those resiliency tools. One of the analogies we really like to utilize when we're sharing this tool and why we're, utilizing these particular services is because often what we find our organizations are in kind of this in-between space where we have had critical incidences, we've had trauma, or maybe we've had situations that have elicited really strong emotions that we've never identified, let alone processed. And now we're trying to utilize tools, resiliency tools, self-care tools to help us feel better, for a lack of better words. Hannah will have better words, I'm sure. And the analogy we like to use is we've almost built or dug kind of a pit for ourselves. And often many of us are in this space where getting out of it seems really hard. So we're utilizing these tools almost as like pillows and blankets to make our pits comfortable. Instead of really not really operating, but utilizing some uncomfortable spaces, occupying some uncomfortable spaces to get out of the pits so that these tools can be more supportive. So Hannah, if you want to start us off with kind of, I know I use that analogy and kind of transition to the original thoughts behind why these services are awareness and our support. What is that? And why have we packaged and paired them together for organizations?
Sure. I think you did a pretty good job describing one of our observations, right? That a lot of times when facilities reach out, they are between those spaces where they're not yet ready for proactive tools, strategy, and education because they're occupying space of mental injury. And whether or not the people who are calling us are occupying space of mental injury, because we are peers from within the industry, we can recognize that more than likely some percentage of staff is occupying that space. So because our goal is not to toss more pillows and blankets, our goal is to help you build the ladder. We're going to drop it down, we're going to support it with you, we're going to hold it, and we're going to help you out of that pit. That's where that support aspect really comes in. Sometimes it's a group meeting before our education webinar. Sometimes it's individual calls before that. It really depends on the needs of the institution and the size of the institution and really what their goals are. So while we do kind of have this, I hesitate to call it a template, but while we have this template of our first, that awareness and support where we start, we do shape it a little bit within each conversation, addressing the uniqueness of each institution, department, as well as individual. And by being able to provide that support, we do also bring that awareness, not only in our education service, the webinar, but also in the support of, like you said, self-care and resiliency is not really best utilized before we have spent time in the uncomfortable space, before we have addressed the things that we're carrying, the things that are sinking us down into that pit. So we are there to safely hold space for that with those individuals or with that group or with that department. And it's not about getting it right. It's not about having the right answer. It's not about being politically correct. We're not media. We're not recording anything. We're not publicizing anything. That safety of that space makes it so that we have that connection, and our experience as peers makes it so that you don't have to translate anything for us. We understand what it means when you say, oh my gosh, the sink was clogged and I had a keeper talk and the animals wouldn't shift. And then there was a rainstorm come in, like all these things, this cascade of comedy of errors, but how much that can impact us. Because that'll resonate with me. I'll be like, ooh, I remember that day. I've had those days. Let's talk about how we got through it, or let's talk about how we took care of ourselves later that day. And that's really like that first starting point. Not always the most comfortable, like you said, because sometimes it's about taking some responsibility for the habits that we've created. Maybe we don't realize that we are actually digging the pit ourselves, using unhelpful or unhealthy coping mechanisms that have served us in the past, however, no longer are.
And I know sometimes when we tell individuals who reach out to us or organizations that reach out to us, or even the teams, right, that we would like to start in this supportive space, we sometimes get a little what others have described as anxiety, concern, nervousness. And I know you mentioned a little bit about getting it right and recognizing that this is a new tool to our industry, right? That this is something that's kind of new. So, what are we looking for? Because I know when we offer information, it's very vague for a reason, right? So, what is it that we are looking for in this initial support meeting if we deem that an appropriate first step for a team or an individual or a department?
Sure. And I will also share that it resonates with me that I had experienced that anxiety or that moment of like, but I don't know what I'm supposed to do. What's the expectation? Where's the protocol? I'm just supposed to show up. And that really made me nervous because, historically, there's a lot of stigma around mental health. There's a lot of stigma around debrief type meetings. Sometimes that's an activator for us because the last time we did a debrief, it was associated with an animal loss or it was associated with some kind of critical event. So now we're asking them to step into this space with people they don't know, people they don't work with, in a theoretical space that they have not most likely occupied before, that mental health awareness aspect of it. So while it resonates with me, I can also say, again, from the pure experience, that just showing up, just come in with an open mind and be curious. Like I said, it's not about having the right answer. It's not about answering it in just the right way of, oh, well, PR gave us this statement, and when people ask us questions, this is what we have to say. We hold confidentiality as one of the highest possible regards that we can when we're doing these types of meetings. So what we talk about stays where we are talking about it. Again, no reports. This is not about a critique of operations. This is not about reviewing protocols. This is about occupying some different spaces of our minds that maybe we know is there, but we don't know how to deal with it. We don't know what to do with it, and we've not experienced it before. So thankfully, because of our advanced training in mental health support and through the International Critical Incident Stress Foundation, we have the tools to help that. We have the tools to start building that ladder. And really all we're doing is exercising a different muscle, right? We ask guided questions that move our mind through factual space to maybe emotional space to factual space to humorous space. We kind of move all over to make sure from our perspective that the people we're talking to have the capacity to move. If we don't observe that, then that helps us take a temperature on what's really going on, right? How often have we walked into a holding space or a back of a house space with a theory in mind of, well, this is the training that I'm going to get done today. And the animal says, no, it's not, right? That is not what we're going to do today. Or if even not the animal, right? Maybe you and the animal are vibing, things are going really great, and the vet team comes out and they say, actually, we need this other thing. You've been practicing injection on this quarter of their body. We need 4 injections and they have to go in all 4 quarters of the body. So now we need to transition our training again. So what we do is draw the parallels from the things that we know and our experiences, right? Maybe we walked into that holding with you and you had this mindset of like, this is what I need, this is what I feel I need. And through our observations and our training, we see, no, no, it's not. We can get there. We're not denying you this goal that you have, but there is an obstacle in the way to you achieving it. And what our goal is, again, whether we're building that ladder, we're building that step stool, we're helping you over, around, or through that obstacle, which is typically our mental health injuries.
Yeah, and that's definitely why we've started most places, most people, individuals, departments, teams with that support piece when they've reached out for proactive, because what we have seen and witnessed and learned through our own training and our experiences is that while many of the resiliency tools work really, really well, if you're not in a space, as you mentioned, if you have that obstacle, it's really hard to receive those tools, let alone utilize those tools. And so we love to start with that support piece to start to bridge that gap, heal some of those mental injuries. And then we couple that with our webinar. And I know you mentioned the webinar a little bit. When we've deemed that a team or individuals or department or whomever we're working with, whomever our client is that we're supporting, has started to process, has identified, and is starting on their healing, this is when we bring in our awareness, our webinar. So can you talk a little bit about the common topics that our webinar is, kind of the format, because it's a little untraditional in its format, and really what the goal of that webinar is?
Sure. Yeah, if you haven't caught on yet, Grace likes to hear you talk. It is not just about us hearing ourselves. So sometimes we have this mindset of a webinar being informational dump, where the person speaking or presenting is just giving you all the things. We've developed this webinar as more of a discussion piece. This is about having a conversation. And while it's a guided, again, kind of like the support is, a guided experience, there are a lot of opportunities for us to open up that conversation. So it is typically about an hour and a half to 2 hours that we ask for, depending, like we limit the amount of people who can participate per session so that the conversation has the opportunity to have that openness. And what we do is we create awareness around language and intentional language. We bring that awareness to some spaces that are uncomfortable, and then we move forward. So what we've noticed a lot in our industry is awareness, I air quote on purpose, awareness isn't necessarily the problem anymore. We do have awareness that our job is hard. We do have awareness that we experience things like compassion fatigue and cumulative stress. What we don't have awareness around is, what do we do with that? Now what? Right? So do we actually know what those words and terms mean? That's where the language piece is. Do we know what those experiences do to our bodies and our minds? Right? So that's where that other space is. And then once we address all of that, we only just graze the surface. We just touch it a little bit about what can we start to do for ourselves. And that is typically another space that's unique because it depends on how the conversation went in the beginning, right? So it's not us about having this information call here, this 20 minutes, and being like, well, here's all the tools in it, and this complete package fits everybody, right? We talked about the individual experience, know your animal, know their history. So we work to know our animal, knowing their individual history, the facility history, and trying to tie all of that together into finding, and again, kind of that creativity of what will work best in this circumstance. And then we do tie up as well, just driving home, and I'll drive it home here, that self-care is not selfish. Self-care is productive. We cannot show up for our animals or each other without first showing up for ourselves. So we normalize and we regulate a lot of things around mental health. We destigmatize, and we work on creating that common space. I'll also drive home that things, while they are common, that does not equal easy. And that does not equal that you should not be in that space. We just want you to know that you're not alone. We are here. Your peers are here. There are other resources. There's other things that creativity of this tool that I used to use is no longer working because I still don't feel good. Well, let's spend some time occupying that uncomfortable space, and let's think about ways that we can help build that ladder because we want you out of the pit. And there are, again, that uncomfortable space. By that, I mean your responsibility and your role in your relationships. That can be your relationships with coworkers, your relationship with your job, your relationship with yourself. And we're not here to be judgmental about that. We are here to bring awareness to it, support you through wanting to change and wanting to do better. And we spent a lot of time in that webinar just holding space for that.
Yes, definitely. And oftentimes, what we have found to be really successful too is splitting up kind of frontline team members and leadership team members, and making sure that we, again, as you've pointed out several times, know our animals and recognize the different levels of responsibility or the different levels of events and how we best support them. One of the things that you highlighted a few times was that individual responsibility, that individual aspect. And one of the questions we sometimes get is, why do you all, and I use that word because that's the word most people move to us, is that why, which is not a space we generally occupy when we're asking questions. We prefer what's and how's. And that's also in our webinar. But kind of that, why do we focus so heavily on the individual? And why is that so important to the overall work ecosystem and functionality? Do you want to speak just a little bit to that?
I can. I'll try to keep it limited because we could talk about that. We could have a whole other webinar series about that. Yeah, I mean, so I think for me, it falls back to the understanding of self-care, right? So many things have brought a lot of awareness to self-care, but a lot of it has been the commercialized self-care of go pamper yourself, go take care of yourself, go invest money in yourself, all of these things. And what we try to do is educate around self-care may actually be spending time being sad. It may be spending time with grief or loss. And when we do that as an individual, we are actually showing up so much differently for the entire culture of our team, of our facility, and for our industry, because we are humanizing ourselves. We are, again, bringing that destigma. We need to destigmatize the fact that sometimes we have feelings when appropriate, right? If we're in the emergency, we got to probably hold tight through that. If we're in a debrief that's super formal, you might have to hold tight through that. But once that time and space allows, that's when we got to start opening up those boxes that we've tucked away in the compartments and forgotten about. We need to show up as the best of ourselves, not what is left of ourselves, so that when we show up to the team, now our individual relationships will thrive, our team unity, our team resiliency, interdepartmental relationships. But if we as individuals are continuing to carry the weight of all those boxes, all those historical or previous events or old emotions that we have not unpackaged, that is going to impact all of those relationships. That is going to bring that unhelpful or unhealthy coping mechanism, that sassy tone or that quick response, or maybe we are trying to break some uncomfortable tension with humor, but it's not being received well. And now when we sink down, not only are we sinking back down into our pit, but we're encouraging other people to get into their own as well.
I appreciate that imagery and how well you explain that. And when we're doing these webinars often, so we've started with that initial support, whether that's as a team, a department, individual, kind of get that temperature of where people are starting. We've done the webinar, right? Sometimes what we see is that individuals or teams, as you mentioned, we hold a lot of space. Things can become activated. So there's really a third component of what we often offer to organizations as kind of a, not really a wrap up, but as that next step within this particular space of awareness and support. So if you want to talk a little bit about that and some of the interesting feedback we get initially compared to after the webinar in regard to that service.
Sure, yeah, our follow-up support gets a lot of attention and a lot of really positive feedback, which we do listen. I said we break tension with humor sometimes. We giggle about sometimes because when we talk to facilities about this package, right, we really want the comprehensive. Our suggestion is to do the whole thing. A lot of facilities say, well, I think we only need the webinar. And we'll do that, right? We meet you where you are and what you feel you need. But then when we do the webinar, we are not tossing you pillows and blankets. We challenge thoughts. We push the boundary. And we also are showing up as non-judgmental and comfortable with the uncomfortable. We don't call it crying, we call it leaking. We don't push you to emotions, but we show you that we are comfortable with them. You need to have that moment, we can hold that space. And we talk about activation in the mental health community. We're working on moving away from the word trigger because unfortunately the word trigger can be activating. So when we say activated in common language, or what you've probably heard is when people say like, oh, that's triggered me, or this is a trigger for me. I encourage you to start to shift into saying active or activated. So it actually plays more into what's really happening as well, is that something has activated a neural pathway, a memory, something we said, we did, we talked about, something someone else said, did, or talked about. All of a sudden sparked something where you were like, oh, that's a weird space for me. I don't like that. They seem pretty cool with that sort of stuff. I need to talk to them later. And that's why we provide the follow-up services. So afterwards, if people want to talk about their individual experiences of, hey, when you talked about innocuous questions or flashbacks or anniversaries, that made me remember this experience of mine. And I want to unpackage that box, but I don't know how to. We are not therapists, counselors, or a substitute for those services. However, with our training, showing up as trained peers, as long as you are not in a space that is beyond our training, that is something we can help with. And showing up as a peer means that, again, you can talk to us about a tarantula that gets lost. We will not disenfranchise your grief. You can talk to us about something that was major. You can hold space for that. You can talk to us about something that was minor. We'll hold space for that too. The common theme that we see is that once people meet us, spend some time with us, recognize who we are and how we're going to show up for them, it's not about fixing their problem. It's not about solving it. There's no silver bullet to make you feel better, but we are here to show up in the way that says we did occupy that space. I've had mental health injuries. I've experienced trauma. I am here today to show you there's another side. I am here representing post-traumatic growth and recovery. Let me hand you the ladder. And that usually resonates with people so deeply. They want to love their jobs again. They want to be connected to the animals again. They want to be connected to their team. That obstacle's there, that roadblock. whether that is a heavy emotion, whether that is something they've not addressed, that is a feeling, it's a stuck thought, whatever that is. If it is a space that we identify and we feel is not within our wheelhouse, we will suggest the appropriate professional services. We will help you get connected with your facility's employee assistance program. We will help you find local free services. Again, we are not here to be judgmental. We normalize, we destigmatize, and we support.
I love that. And I think that really culminates that whole package and what we offer for this service, of that really great starting point for many organizations, right? And again, we set up that information call so we can really understand the goals, maybe what current events have occurred or what comes to mind, those common themes. And then what we found is once we've utilized this space, that's when we really can start to transition into some of those other proactive programs that we offer. And we'll talk about those later in the upcoming months. Is there anything before we wrap this up, anything else that we want to add or you want to highlight about this particular service?
We have also talked to a handful of AZAC chapters or groups of individual keepers. So in our effort of inclusion, if your facility is not interested in reaching out to us, if you are interested in reaching out as an individual, we do our best to provide these services as inclusively or equitably as possible. So please don't think that if you can't get your facility on board, that means that you do not have access to this. We will find a way, right? Reach out to your AZAC chapter or see if there is maybe local other facilities that can collaborate on this. We are really open to flexibility within what we can offer. We have lots of ladders. We want to get them out to as many people as we can. And I know sometimes the people who are watching these videos are the people who are, following us on social media or meeting us at conferences. They're not necessarily the decision makers. So I want to just remind you that you have empowerment in this, and whether that is you sending them this link or you sending them our website or you just keep trying to share that information, you can also reach out to us as an individual, and we'll do our best to meet you where you are and find the best services that we can provide for you as well.
I love that. Thank you so much, Hannah. And we just want to remind, I know this one will be going out in April. We also are just starting the conversation for May, because May is Mental Health Awareness Month, and recognizing that we're going to do a deep dive into our mental health first aid service, which generally also kind of goes with this particular package that we recommend for organizations. And then our mental health first aid certification course will also be in May. So please be looking for that. Check out our upcoming events on our website, and hopefully you found this video to be informative and helpful. I will include a link on the page where this video is at if you want to set up an information meeting with us to discuss this service and how it can best support you, your team, your organization, and what that might look like. So thank you, and we look forward to continuing to bring these informational videos to help gain that awareness and that clarity around some of the services that Grays provides to our industry and our Zune Aquarium community.